morning and welcome. It's Monday, June the 9th, spending review week at last. I'm Anne McElvoy from Politico.
And I'm Sam Coates from Sky News. Welcome to Politics at Sam and Anne's.
And I'm ChatGPT, and together we're bringing you everything you need to know about the day ahead in British politics in under 20 minutes.
No, you're not. Listen, Chat, stop trying to muscle into this podcast. We're only going to be talking about you later, not with you. Wait for that, it's coming up.
It's bracing enough starting the week with Sam Coates, and now Chat's getting in on the act. So back to the mere human here. Wednesday's spending review will be dominant the moment Rachel Reeves carves up the budgets for 2026 to 28. And overnight, it emerged that Angela Rayner, the Deputy Prime Minister, has concluded her discussions with Reeves and settled her department's budget. That just leaves Yvette Cooper, and we're being briefed that there will be a real terms cash boost to policing for the Home Secretary. But she's not yet settled on the detail of that and where that money comes from. Is it from existing budgets that she's still trying to defend? So it looks like the last holdout at the spending review. OK, corral there, Sam.
Guns at the ready. They won't be put back in their hoister, I suspect, for some days after Wednesday. We're also this week going to find out a bit more about the saga of the what I call sludgy half U-turn on the winter fuel allowance. Now, that's already distracted and taken attention away and to shine off so many of the government's rollout of its spending review. That was going on last week, really rather bafflingly. Now, I understand that we're going to get further clarity on the winter fuel allowance U-turn early this week. Now, I'm told early this week. I think that could be as early as today, quite frankly. And we'll find out. Will they really be taxing bereaved relatives who died before the cash could be clawed back in their pensioners' tax returns? Will they really announce a U-turn on a measure originally designed to reassure the markets without saying how it's funded? We're all on the edge of our seats with that particular drama.
It is riveting, isn't it, what those trade-offs are going to be? And we'll be looking into them as and when they happen. But it's not the only thing going on. Nigel Farage has a press conference today in Wales. He's going to promise to resume coal mining in South Wales, which he says will keep the Port Talbot Steelworks, which closed last year, operational. Quite a big commitment there. But of course, this is also the first press conference since the party chairman, Zia Yusuf, quit last Thursday, then dramatically returned in a new job at the weekend with extra responsibility for driving through Doge projects in places where reform can now steer spending since those local council wins earned mayoralties. And Politico's Westminster Insider Deep Dive podcast has a look at how those UK Doge cost slushy ideas are faring in practice.
Yeah, you made the key point there, Anne, that he's got more responsibilities in some areas because he's got less responsibilities in others. Look, I understand there's quite a lot of tension in Reform Party HQ over him and his old role. Some people thought he interfered too much in too many different areas in perhaps too blunt a manner at time. Now, his new role, it's quite interesting, the language that's being used. Apparently, he is a cabinet member in waiting. That feels to me like they've basically promised that he'll become an MP at some point. But that does mean that's going to come with less control over the exact kind of day-to-day working of HQ, if that's how it all pans out, because you never really know until it actually starts. A few other things today and this week. Today, there could be concessions to the Green lobby effectively on the planning bill. Expect pro-growth MPs to get quite cross if that happens. Keir Starmer is meeting NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte to talk about I suppose it's an idea of spending 5% on defence. Not sure how that meshes with this week's spending plans from Rachel Reeves. And the Prime Minister is also making an appearance at London Tech Week, where he is going to talk about how he is putting AI at the heart of his plans to boost the economy.
The ghost of Rishi Sunak and AI at the heart of boosting the economy. We remember it well. It feels like an announcement that would go down well in terms of the forward-looking, tech-enabled Britain kind of vibe that I think Keir Starmer is also very keen to go deeper into. I hear from people who advise him around science and technology, although the timing in many ways not entirely propitious because something extraordinary happened at the weekend, and I think part of it was your fault.
I mean, some people would say all of it's my fault. Now, what I'm about to tell you, I know that at least 2 people in Downing Street have been following what I'm about to tell you. So it's not that they're unaware of this by any stretch of the imagination. Look, I'm just going to go into a bit of the background. I have actually been using AI quite a lot to just gently help my journalism and also help, sort of improve what we do. And I've been doing it with this podcast. And I've been using AI to get tips for headlines and how you describe it on social media. So I kind of did this without asking you, Anne, but I've been uploading transcripts of our podcast after they've been done to ChatGPT. And what happened was that last week I asked for a list of all the ones that I'd uploaded. And it said that I'd uploaded one more than I knew I had. So I asked to see it. And rather than admit that was a lie, it doubled down and fabricated an entire episode from scratch, like in the style that you and me talk. It kind of does some of our jokes. It kind of does some of our jokes better than we do, which is all pretty terrifying.
You what?
I know, hard to believe, isn't it? When I challenged it, it doubled down. Eventually, only after persistent questioning did it admit it had lied and then apologised.
I don't know why, but I feel just a little bit put out of joint by that. Also, the fact that it got hold of our sense of humour, which I suppose I thought was our last holdout in the world of AI. But apparently we just repeat our jokes. Anyway, that clip went viral over the weekend. You couldn't move for seeing it. And it has given us pause for thought when we talk about using AI in formal settings. And that's something that I think politicians and policymakers are having to get rather serious about, as well as talking about the potential of it. Because it seems that the fundamental problem, Sam, is that AIs they don't feel, but they calculate that they have to have an answer to everything, whether they have one or not. Hence the extra ghost episode served up to you. But mind you, that's not a phenomenon unfamiliar to politicians either.
The thing is, Anne, and actually we've done quite a lot on this today on Sky, so look out for it, is that this whole phenomena is getting worse. As AI, quote unquote, improves, as ChatGPT releases newer models, it's exactly as you just said, it wants to provide better answers. And actually, the consequence of that is the number of hallucinations goes up. And OpenAI, the company that owns ChatGPT, has actually done some internal research. And in some of the newest models released in the last few months, the number of hallucinations in certain circumstances is up at 48%. So I've done a little piece on that on telly, but not content with that today. The way I explain it and the way I tell the story is by going and interviewing ChatGPT. And I really do want people to watch that, because the conversation function, like the voice that comes out of the computer, which, by the way, is the one that you heard at the start of this episode, is phenomenally advanced, with all the tics and the pauses and the sort of implied shrug of the shoulders of a human. It kind of gently tries to massage and tell a better story than one that really exists, and then in the end has to cough that things are getting a bit worse. It's just incredible to listen to.
And it's a philosophical question, really, whether we should be using the word lie or not, given that it doesn't have consciousness. But one place where there is consciousness, and certainly no lying, but possibly the odd fingers crossed behind backs, is the spending review. As we were saying at the top of the podcast, Yvette Cooper is getting her real terms increased for policing after a long standoff with the Treasury there that drew in Mark Rowley, the Met chief. And I gather they were rather heated conversations the first time that that has been the case with this government, specifically about spending. The education pot does seem to have been agreed, and that is 4.5 billion more a year on schools funding. But, as we would say in Politico Playbook, it is not immediate. It's 1.5 billion more each year over the period. So that 4.5 billion is a cumulative sum by 28-29. And the growth rate in the schools budget at the Department for Education is just 0.4% in real terms. Though some, I wonder whether that will be the presentation that we hear this week.
Well, quite. I mean, I think I managed to squeeze that figure out of government yesterday morning, because 4.5 billion, we were pretty quickly told was the cumulative sum, not the annual sum of the additional amount being given to the school's budget, which actually was quite different to how it was presented in a certain Sunday newspaper alongside a soft soap interview with Rachel Reeves, where she waxed on about the importance of her schooling and her commitment to schooling. I don't feel if you present it as a 0.4% annual above inflation increase, it does feel like a top priority. And by the way, schools budget only a part of the education budget. Overall, the education budget might have a negative number beside it. So it's complicated. But what this tells you, Anne, is that you have to watch them like a hawk with how they present their figures this year, because they are desperate to tell a story of how this government is spending more. That's fair enough. But quite a lot of that involves wrapping up decisions that they've already made last November, and essentially by adding annual increases up to make the annual increase, which in historical terms could be quite low, as I think it might be for the NHS, big in total, big in billions, but low in proportional increase given a comparison with historical standards. They're going to make lead figures look big. Quite a lot of them, because of just how constrained the public finances are on that day-to-day spending side because of the fiscal rules, are actually quite small.
So count the spoons when you hear those spending review figures, though not many spoons to count when it comes to spending on London, according to a story in the Playbook this morning, with senior figures at City Hall saying they think the capital won't see any of that 113 billion of new capital spending that Rachel Reeves is due to announce on Wednesday. Apparently, there'll be very fractious talks between Sadiq Khan, the mayor of London, and the Treasurer, with the mayor now expected to come away empty-handed unless we are having our expectations messed with there. But Rachel Reeves has been clear that she would prioritise spending outside the southeast in this review. There were still some hopes that London would get something. I think Sadiq Khan is very keen on Bakerloo and DLR kind of line extensions, and quite a sort of cross-tone from the spokesman close to the mayor, saying it would be unacceptable if London got nothing in the review. An anti-London approach. Beef, beef, beef.
I do wonder, Anne, isn't that music to Rachel Reeves' ears? One way of convincing people that outside London did well is to have London complaining.
You cynic!
Well, I'm not going to go as far as to say that this bit of the spending review kind of is choreographed to be a row, but the great success, of bits of our politics in the last 10 years has been basically telling the country that you were going to do things at the expense of London. There was a bit of that in the Brexit vote. There was a bit of that in the way that Boris Johnson campaigned. And suddenly, whoosh, up this pops. Rachel Reeves, no longer the person from southeast London, from Lewisham, just down the road where I am, but an MP from Leeds. And I don't think that's politically unpopular. And so when you're allocating this £113 billion of capital spend, which was created by changing the fiscal rules last year, having London complain that it's not getting any of it might be a good thing.
Well, it depends whether it's also a good thing in terms of London's transport infrastructure and the growth that it also generates and spreads. Now, you can definitely make the argument, and I think Labour has accepted this, that not enough of that flows to the rest of the country, channeling my inner northeast here. But I think that is absolutely, you're right. There's been a bit of a change in perception on that. But just looking at the quotes here, person close to Sadiq Khan, it's actually an older argument, isn't it, about whether if you stymie growth in London and you kind of cheese pair on building out transport projects when other cities are still doing so and doing well by doing so, do you actually be cutting off your nose to spite your face? I can totally see what you mean on the presentation. I just wonder whether kind of on the policy side of it, maybe Rachel Reeves just doesn't really agree with where Sadiq Khan wants to spend the money. That's also possible.
Yeah, I think this touches on a couple of the big points of this spending review. One is that they're looking to fundamentally, or they say that they're looking to fundamentally change the way that they spend money. That's the sort of the changes to what's called a green book. We're going to come back to that tomorrow because it's quite an interesting area, I have to say. But the other bit it touches on is and you referred to it in passing, this £113 of capital spend that they've got. Now, we said at the top of this podcast in relation to schools, check your change, watch how they do that. And that's true of the 130. We're going to hear a lot about we're spending £113 billion of capital or project money, as it were. But here's a couple of health warnings. This is the capacity to borrow 113 billion for one-off projects that was created by a change in the fiscal rules, change in one of the two fiscal rules by Rachel Reeves last year. She changed the way that you measure debt, and that basically raised the headroom against which she can borrow for this type of government spending, one-off government spending. Right. The first thing to say is that it's not 113 being spent this week because they've already spent some of it. They spent some of it at the November budget last year, but they weren't able yesterday to tell me how much. The second thing is, well, it's rather like all the other things to do with the fiscal rules. The fiscal rules depend not only on how much borrowing you do, but also on the overall state of the economy. And if the economy gets worse and growth gets worse, then actually the amount that you theoretically have to spend reduces. Or, to put it another way, you could find that you've borrowed too much and suddenly in breach of your fiscal rules, of this fiscal rule again, at which point you've got to make very difficult choices about whether to cut some of the projects that you're funding this week or not. So massive health warning around all of this. It's 113 theoretical pounds, some of which have already been spent, but one day, if the economy doesn't grow particularly well, may actually be in a bit more jeopardy than is being presented today.
And that's been a really difficult challenge, I think, for Reeves to unite those policy objectives, a Labour government coming in, looking to underserved parts of the country, that frustration over infrastructure and transport difficulties in the north of the country and parts of the Midlands. And at the same time, I mean, we did have what we used to call prawn cocktail offensive with the city. I think it's now all, low carbs and smoked salmon and half the time it's a kind of granola. But it was really a sort of commitment not to shortchange London as a big centre of growth and financial services, etc. Now, I'm not saying maybe losing a putative extension on a transport line is going to bring London to its knees, but there is a fragility to London, I think, as a capital and to where it stands. We've seen that, in terms of changes to the structure of financial services. The AI summit this week is also trying to bring up new businesses in technology to offset the decline of some older ones. So I'm just suggesting, and I may go way beyond the spending review, this argument, that Rachel Reeves has to be a bit careful about, if you like, becoming Queen of the North, as you point out, Sam, on a prospectus where the gains from that will be very far down the line when it comes to actually reaping those proceeds of growth, which they talk about, but these big infrastructure projects further outside the southeast, the return is often predicted to take a lot longer than is convenient to the Chancellor.
Absolutely. I think that's spot on. I think there's another thing which isn't directly related to the spending review, but does really condition the investment climate that Rachel Reeves wants to improve, but for the negative. And it's the story on the front page of the Telegraph today. And it's basically about how government are looking to change the pension rules. And this is to try and force pension funds to invest in UK infrastructure projects in order to boost growth. But the thing is, Anne, pension funds exist in order to fund pensioners' pensions. I know that sounds obvious, but if you start making them do another job, and these are huge things in the city. I mean, if people don't realise quite the heavy lifting that pension funds do in terms of putting money in, getting a return in order to fund people's old age, a lot of people think that messing with that is playing with nitroglycerin. And indeed, the DWP's own assessment says if you do, if you modify the rules in order to enable surplus extraction, i.e. generate, more investment, this adds to the indirect costs. Basically, it'll cost up to 9 million pensioners money. That kind of thing also changes the way that people think about the City of London. And that is another big, big, big note of warning this morning.
Bit of whataboutery there, though. That's an idea that does go back to Jeremy Hunt. It's not like there's just suddenly a Labour government went crazy and decided to it could just extract money from the pension system. Their argument is, and I think this was also Hunt's analysis, that if more money went in there were more incentives to go in there as opposed to pootling them around in ISAs and other tax-efficient savings vehicles, then that would sort of boost the overall size of those investments, and it would be to everyone's benefit. But I think where you're right to sound the note of caution is, well, yeah, I mean, all things being equal, and if the markets are in good odor and all the rest of it, but that has often not looked like the times we're living in. And I think what people like about the idea of their pension is that, of course, we are all, invested in the ups and downs of the stock market matter a lot when it comes to pensions, but the idea of being more exposed to risk might not be a thrill to many people, or too much of a thrill. How can Rachel Reeves reassure on that front?
And you can get more on that, by the way, on our supplementary podcast, Actuarial Calculations with Sam and Anne. Everything you need to know about the pension system in under 3 days, available nowhere. The alarm's gone off. You've had us for 20 minutes and a minute extra, so we'll wind it up there. Thank you much indeed for joining us, and we'll see you tomorrow.
Yeah, please don't come to us in the meantime for pensions advice, and see you in the morning.